between, say, an Englishman and a Welshman. In the Central Europe, between a German and an Austrian. In Italy, between an Italian, for example, and a Sicilian. So even though these are regional variations, if you will, they still belong to the same general civilization complex. So did Egypt and Nubia, and the Egyptians themselves said so. They themselves knew that their civilization derived from the southern part of their, south of their borders, and they knew that it derived from what we call Nubia, or Ethiopia. So civilization itself descends the Nile from Inner Africa. If you will, it crystallizes in Nubia and then reaches its highest and final form in the land called Kemet, or ancient Egypt, over a period of 4,000 years of unbroken Egyptian civilization.
Modern evidence appears to confirm the tradition that civilization traveled northward from Nubia into Egypt. Skulls and skeletons unearthed in Nubia and Egypt are of the same or similar African racial type. Some of the most ancient paintings and drawings of Nubians and Egyptians also depict them as a distinctly African people. As Dr. Finch has noted, Egypt's general political structure and divine kingship appear to have been modeled after the Tasseti dynasty of Nubia that preceded that of Egypt by over 200 years. In other words, there were pharaohs ruling Nubia long before Egypt became a nation. Some scientists insist that pyramid building also began in Nubia and was refined and perfected after the Nubians moved northward and settled in Egypt. Even mummification appears to have started in Nubia and to have spread northward into Egypt 500 years after it was invented. Nubia was also considered the land of the gods and the spiritual home of the Egyptian people. Perhaps that is why the chief beneficent gods and goddesses of Egypt, such as Osiris and Isis, were depicted as blacks. Finally, during all of her periods of upheaval, chaos, and foreign invasions, Egypt was rescued and reunited by powerful black men from the Nubian south. This was true of the Mentuhoteps in the Middle Kingdom, it was true of almost the first in the New Kingdom, and it was true of Pianki and Taharqa during the 25th dynasty.
Although not all scientists and scholars agree, the weight of evidence certainly points toward a black origin of Egyptian civilization. In time, of course, Asians and Europeans settled Lower Egypt near the Mediterranean Sea and ultimately intermingled with the native black population. Nevertheless, Egypt's cultural, physical, and spiritual legacy was chiefly derived from the black Nubian South. This no doubt explains why, in later years, the visiting Hebrews, Greeks, Romans, and others described the ancient Egyptians as black-skinned with close curled hair. The distinguished writer, Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, captured the opinions of the ancients when he wrote, "We conclude, therefore, that the Egyptians were Negroid, and not only that, but by tradition they believed themselves descended, not from the whites or the yellows, but from the black people of the South. Thence they traced their origin, and toward the South in earlier days, they turned the